She moved here, but she said she moved.
You kind of look like a DJ with that.
Do I?
Yeah.
So remember how last time Mr. Feek read off the online
Oh, yeah.
comments? Do you want us to do
Yeah, let's just save that till the end,
Okay.
and I'll have questions at the
so
end.
when nobody else is asking questions, you want me to just...
Yeah,
Okay.
so,
Awesome.
all right, are we good sound-wise? You guys gonna make me look good on the film?
Yeah, we'll make it
Good,
really
good.
pretty.
All right.
You got your mic on?
Yep, it's on. Good. Are you guys ready?
Yeah.
Okay, welcome to our bond informational meeting. I want to thank you for being here, especially in the midday. It's not always easy. I want to thank our high school broadcasting class for putting this out for everyone that's not here. So thanks for anyone that's online as well. And they'll be monitoring the questions that come in online as well. If you have questions, I'd ask that you hold them till the end. We have some papers over there we can pass out. You can write them down so you don't forget them. And then at the end, we'll answer them. I'm going to go through a fairly brief presentation that I think will answer a lot of questions that we've been getting. And then we're happy to answer as many questions as you have at the end as well. And so some of this you probably already know because if you've been following the bond, so we'll go through it quickly. But if you need me to slow down at any point, let me know. So our enrollment, what brought us to this point is obviously our enrollment has spiked along with the population in our community. If you look back 10 years, our total enrollment at that time was just under 5,000 students. Jump ahead, and now we're at, actually this was from, I think, December, we're about 6,700 students now. And so we're growing at a pretty good rate. The average growth is about 3% a year, which doesn't sound like much until you run 3% on 6,500 students. And that's several hundred students a year. So our projected enrollment going forward. So these numbers, we ran these last year. We projected at 3%. This year we'd be at 67, 63, actually over 68 when we get everyone in. This was again in January. So you can run those numbers out and see that we put 3%. Our biggest growth year was about 5 years ago. We had 5.7, 5.8% growth. So that's why we put the 6% in, because that's kind of the cap that we've seen. So we've kind of been basing it on 3% because that's the average over the last 10 years, with some that are higher and some that are lower. So the proposed projects, one, to build a new middle school. Right now our biggest concern is the high school. The high school was built for somewhere between 1,800 students. We have 2,100 students in there now. We know we'll get 100 more students next year just by bringing in a bigger class than is what's leaving. And so the question is obviously why build a new middle school, and we'll get to that. But we would build a new middle school on property that the district owns, 200 north, 4,100 east, and the estimated cost for that is $63 million. Then we would take the existing Rigby Middle School and we would expand the high school campus to create more space at the high school level. And in that, not only just expand that campus, but we would provide more opportunities for students through career technical education. Expanding our fabulous career technical education courses that we have now. Broadcasting is one of them. We have ag courses, business courses, welding courses, auto mechanics courses. All of these courses that really we're limiting who can be in them, and as well as adding additional courses. We talked about like a dental assisting program, a medical assisting, an EMT program, cybersecurity, things like that, to where it really gives kids hands-on experience that they enter the workforce out of high school if that's their goal, with some experience. We went and visited one in Idaho Falls School District, and they're sending kids out that are actually doing interns and making $60,000, $70,000 a year as an intern stepping into that because of that. So for those kids that college isn't the answer, this is a great thing. And for those kids that college is the answer, it gives them a step up as well. If they can go into college and they're interested in the medical field and they can leave with that background, with an associate's degree, that's a huge advantage for them. The estimated cost for that is $5 million. And then Farnsworth Middle School. Currently, Rigby Middle School has about 960 students, and Farnsworth is just over 600 students. But they don't have some of the opportunities that this school has or that a new middle school would have. So we'd want to expand that to create more space, for one, but also to add some of those like a family consumer science classroom, those types of things that aren't in that school now. But again, and that would give us the opportunity to balance those numbers out as we move forward as well. Okay, and you may be aware there's a separate bond question. So those projects I just talked about, they equal up to $75 million. There's a separate question on the bond, a total separate bond for $5 million for a gymnasium at Roberts Elementary. Roberts is the only school in the district without a gym. They have a cafeteria that functions as a cafeteria, multi-purpose room, auditorium, PE, gymnasium. So that's what this would be for. But again, one of these could pass and the other could fail. They could both pass. They're on their own merits. So it's two separate questions on the bond. So the information on the bond. The big question we always get is, well, this just summarizes those costs again, is what is it going to do to my taxes? And that's a great question. Obviously, we're all concerned about that. As we add bond, there's got to be a way to pay for that. And the way in Idaho to build buildings is through bonding. That's the only way, unless someone writes us a check, and that hasn't happened yet. And so that's how it is. So, and normally I would have Bryce, he's our business manager, do this, but he's just recovering from not feeling well, so he's going to correct me if I'm wrong, but he's not up to talking right now. So this, if you take the cost of your home, this is the average, the Zillow Home Value Index for the Rigby area, just under 500,000. You get your homeowner's exemption of 125,000, so the taxable value, 370,000 roughly. So the total levy rate per $100,000 is $327. The annual tax impact is, if the 75 million was just to pass, would be 156. If all of it, would be 166. If just the Roberts Gym, it would be $10. That would be the annual impact per 100,000. Because this number is the new bond, it's built into this 327 number that you're currently paying. And we'll explain how we can do that without raising that. Okay, so how can we pay bond without raising taxes? If you look at these, each color here represents a bond the school has. And if you look at your tax, whatever they call it, bill, you'll see several different bonds for the school district. Truly, there's two. There's Cottonwood Elementary that was built 2018, and then there's the high school. But the high school, there's a series of 3 bonds on the...
Started with 4, but now there's 3.
There was 4, now there's 3. And the reason for that was, at the time, there were a lot of government programs that helped pay for bonds, specifically the interest on bonds for school districts. But they had caps on how much they could be. So we split those up into smaller amounts so we could take advantage on that. Some of those series we actually pay no interest on, and others are very limited interest. So rather than having just one bond and only taking small advantage, we were able to break that up and take advantage of all of those programs, if that makes sense. The South Fork Elementary bond, that fell off in September of this year, which created some capacity there. So each one of these, the green represents the new bond. So currently, we have about $7.5 million of bond obligations. That includes this new bond. So a little bit of history. In the past, the way the district has collected their bond money was based on the market value or taxable value of your home. So as that went up, the amount you paid went up, which worked okay when we were seeing moderate increases. Like, it wasn't a big impact, but over the last 2 to 3 years, we've seen these huge increases, and it just impacts families, and we're paying a lot. So the change in philosophy was, okay, what are our debt obligations? There's a certain dollar amount, that's the number we'll collect. So as property values go up, that truly doesn't affect it because it's a set dollar amount. And as more people move in and pay into that, it actually could go down, if that makes sense, because you have more people paying for that set dollar amount. So truly, the way that we can add a bond without raising your annual taxes is by spreading that out. So we can build the payments to where we pay less at the beginning, and then as these other bonds fall off, we can pay more. So what you're paying now isn't going to be any different than next year or the year after if the bond passes. Now, if it didn't pass, then within about 2 years, you would see that go down because those would fall off, and so those taxes would go down. We'd still face the same problems we have, but we wouldn't have, those taxes would go down. Okay, election date, March 14th, which is Tuesday. Did I miss anything, Bryce?
No.
Okay. So I'm happy to answer any questions. We have some questions that have come in, been emailed that we'll answer as well, but I'll take the ones for those here or any online if you have any first. Yes?
Well, the CTE building is going to require teachers and equipment. Is the price for those included?
Great question. So for the equipment, yes. Teachers, no matter where we put kids, we got to have teachers for them. And so we're funded on teachers based on the number of students we have. And so that comes from state funding. That doesn't come from the bond. But yes, this would include the renovation of that building and then getting that into a classroom, all the supplies and materials and things it needs to do that. Good question. Yes?
So how long does these current projects,
That's to help so online they can hear.
how long do these current projects, so how long will it take before we have overcrowding again?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. The answer to that is, depends on what growth does, right?
If we continue with our normal,
With our 3% growth, so at the middle schools, we think we would be good with 3% growth. So at the high school, like I said, next year we add 100 students. After that, those classes coming in, they level out. So then we're not having to worry about bigger classes coming in other than what moves in, if that makes sense. So with that, we figure 7 to 10 years based on the capacity that we have now. So
and then at that time is when we would then need to do a new high school or?
most likely, yeah. We'd have to do something, yeah. Yes.
That was the question. You're saying you've got about 7 years, right? Potentially.
7 to 10, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and who knows, like, but that's the,
Right.
yeah.
But then the question is, you're going to have to do a new high school.
Yeah, if that growth continues, at some point we will, yeah.
So.
So why not now?
Yeah.
Right.
The question is, why don't you buy the bullet today?
So that's a good question. So there's a couple of reasons. If we look at long-range planning, one, geographically, the way the district's set up, we have everything on this side except for elementary schools. So let's say we were to build a high school on this property, which this property is big enough for a middle school, high school, so that would be the long-range plan. You build a high school, you're busing students either next to the other high school or past the other high school, and logistically it's a nightmare. So that's one reason. The other reason, a new high school is about $120 million, and last year when we were talking about this, we didn't have the bonding capacity. That just wasn't on the table. Now it probably could be, but we couldn't do that without raising taxes. And secondly, if you look to that 7 and 10 years down the road, if we were to build a new high school now, we'd have 2 high schools then. Now, if we build a new high school in 7 to 10 years down the road, we would have 2 high schools, but we'd also have the CTE facility for all the students to use of both high schools. And so we feel like it's a bigger bang for the buck, but that was strongly considered. That was a big conversation with the board, was do we do that now? But those are some of the conversations that took place. Say, no, maybe not. So.
Take the mic. So a follow-up question was just simply, do you know, or is there data available that shows where that growth might occur? You know, is it going to occur
Yeah.
east of 20, west of 20? Where do you think it might happen?
Well, that's a key word, it would be think, because no, it depends on which farmer decides to sell and develop their fields, because.
Zoning lets them.
Right, yeah, and so, I mean, I do get updates monthly on building permits and subdivisions that have been approved, but there's no rhyme or reason to, okay, we're going to, be moving this way. It seems to be the growth is out there right now, but I believe when these schools were built, it was believed the growth was going to be this way, and then it kind of took off that way. So, honestly, but we do know that right now, that's where we need to relieve some pressure. One, for traffic as well, because almost every student in our district touches Highway 48 twice a day at least. This would at least keep some on that side and then some south as well.
Yeah, it just seems would be a mistake to build a high school out there if the growth went that way.
Right.
Now you're trucking people that way anyway.
Yeah.
And 48 doesn't see
Right, yeah, if it all quit, but we do know right now how many students we have out there. And we do know that we have enough students out there right now that that middle school makes sense. Yeah, that's a good question though. And I wish there was a way to have more planning on that, but yeah. Yes?
On that new middle school up there, how are you going to get the people in and out? 48 is all bound up right now.
It is. So actually, I believe that it will actually relieve some pressure from 48, because right now, every middle school student has to go to 48, or else county line, but mostly go to 48. But that won't be the case now, because all of those that are east and south of 48 won't have to. All those middle school, they'll just go to the middle school. They won't have to get on 48.
How much ground have you got out there?
There's 70 acres. Yeah.
Now, the grade school out here, you can't get in or out.
Which one?
The one that sits out here on 48.
Oh, Cotton, or South Fork, yeah.
South Fork.
Yeah.
And I live out there.
Yeah.
I see the traffic.
I drop my daughter off there sometimes too, I get it.
Just out to the county and nobody knows what they're going to do.
Yeah. I know there's a proposal I just saw to put a light at 4,000, which would help with some of that. But yeah, I agree. One thing that we will have to do is do a traffic study wherever it is and then we work with the engineers, we work with the transportation, ITD, we work with the county and say, okay, let's talk about this.
48 is the state.
Right, so that would be ITD.
Them.
Yeah, and they are. We've talked with them a lot. Yeah, that would be ITD. Like when we built Cottonwood, we had to widen some roads, and so because that came out of that study. So that's all part of it. But reality is, wherever we put a school, there's going to be more traffic.
It'll be a bunch.
Yeah, yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
This way. On CTE, on the remodel, I would like to know, are you remodeling any of the gym? And for what purpose, if you are?
So good question. So most likely no, because one of the things that we need with our increased population is more PE space, more practice space, things like that. So we would probably leave that alone, and the auditorium we would either leave alone or upgrade that. But those two would be part of that core that would stay the same.
So part of the money for remodel, was it 5 million?
5 million for that, yeah.
It doesn't have anything to do with remodeling the existing gym or
No.
doing any upgrades to that gym?
Not as far as CTE, no.
No, I'm saying for use.
That's not
at
the
all.
plan. Now,
Not-
granted, we don't have a full set of drawings or anything yet,
Yeah,
because,
I was just wondering.
right.
Like, are they planning to upgrade that to use that as a, like, kind of a field house?
No, it will remain a gym like it is now because we need that PE space and stuff. So it wouldn't be big enough for the
Well,
purpose of
not
the field
same as
house,
field
yeah.
house, But
Yeah.
we were looking for more space.
Yeah.
So I wondered.
Yeah.
if we
Well,
would
we'll create more
add anything like
space.
Maybe golf simulators or batting cages or anything like
Yeah.
that. If-
It will create more space, and it may make sense to put, in the upper areas, a batting cage or something like that, because right now they're going till 10 o'clock at night,
That's
but
not currently part of the money.
no.
Okay.
And that's a very insignificant amount of money to do that, yeah.
Well,
In
not
5.
if you do a complete overhaul.
Right, yeah, but I mean to add a batting cages. That would probably be done before, actually, if it was going to happen.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then my next question is in regards to Roberts Elementary.
Mhm.
It is broken into 2 parts. The first one being the gymnasium, and the second part being additional money.
Mhm.
And that says specifically on the bond, any structure within the district. So any
Right.
remaining money after Roberts Gym is done, the bathrooms are done, and that entire project, what is to be done with that money and how
Right.
is it going to be done?
So that's a good question, and that's on there because that's the smaller portion of that. And truthfully, I'm more worried about that money not going far enough at Roberts than having money left over.
Okay, but
So,
my question isn't that.
But at that point, it could go to
It's specific
maintenance to
Roberts
other
in part
place.
1, and part 2 says any structure within the
Right.
district. And my question is, why wasn't it said Roberts specific? And if there is,
Right.
there is, and I realize that
Right, yeah.
big if,
Mhm.
I would like to know how that's going to be handled. Are you moving it to another structure within the district? And is there a priority list of what structure it would be?
So at this point, so here's the issue. When you put on the bond, that money can be used for only that purpose, right?
Right.
And so let's say that we,
That
right,
part 2 does not
What-
legally. It's
Right.
Any structure.
right,
Okay.
and that's what I'm getting at, so let me talk, all right? So if we have money left over, you're kind of handcuffed with that. Like you,
Right.
and so now let's say there's a couple $100,000 left over and a boiler goes out at Midway. Okay, that allows us to do that, I think is what you're getting at. Are we trying to,
And I've gone in
to,
circles with some people this morning about it, and I'm
Right.
like, no, legally it says any structure. So I would like to know what the district plans.
Right.
There is, which is a small chance. And I
Right.
hope that Roberts gets everything they need, 100%.
well, they will get what they need
Whether
before
it's-
money goes anywhere else, so yes.
Right.
Because that is that has to be done.
Right.
The Roberts one is
Not
stated there,
just
that
again,
has to be
but
done.
that all
You're right,
fixing
Yeah.
of Roberts.
Mhm.
But if there is,
right.
would you, because one of the bond committee, which I know is separate from the district, but
Mm-hmm.
one of those members that I'm having this conversation with is like, no, it has to go back for vote on the ballot if there's, say, 200,000. I'm like, no, it can be moved. And
Right, with that money, it wouldn't.
Someone who I'm concerned,
Right.
like, I'll just say, if you haven't followed this morning's social,
Mm-hmm.
I'm the one on there that I'm basically saying, I would like to see Farnsworth have their AC fixed if their bond
Right.
doesn't pass, and they can't. You know, so there's.
So I could tell you right now, that there's a plan in the works for that
Okay,
already without this money.
but that's just
yeah.
an example.
Right. So that's the type of things it would go to. I think the question is it going to go to a athletic facility? Kind of the underlying question.
No, my.
And the answer is no.
question is what,
Yeah.
there's got to be a priority list. If
Right.
there's if it's 4.3 million is what it's basically slated for, if we have that extra money.
So
where's
that's for the gym.
money and what's the priority?
Right.
No, yeah, the gym and the bathrooms and whatnot.
Right, yeah.
But if there were to be extra,
Mhm.
what's the priority list and where does it fall?
Right. So here's the hard thing too. So
On the other one.
So AC is a priority, at not just Farnsworth, but Jefferson. Probably more so at Jefferson
Right,
because they're
right.
smaller kids.
For sure.
So we do have a plan for that, but we haven't got bids back yet. So if we have enough money to do one of those, or both of them, we'll do them now. If we have to push one off, that would be a priority list. But the problem is, so we pass the bond, we get money in, access to it in like July, it takes a year or two to build. We don't know what those maintenance issues could be 2 years from now.
Right.
And so to say, this is our we can give you a priority list now, but some of those might become such a priority they have to be addressed before that, and there may be one that we don't even know about yet that comes up. So that's why, I mean, but that's also why we didn't put that on the bigger number, because then there's a potential to have that bigger amount there, and then it creates a lot more ambiguity than just over the
Right.
5 million.
Okay, I just had to be clear because from what my legal knowledge and my knowledge of how the bond is written,
Mm-hmm.
it is not specific to Roberts Elementary in Part 2. So additional
Right.
funds will be used wherever in the.
Could be
district.
if there's any left over after
If there's
Roberts.
anything that's fit.
Yeah,
Okay.
potentially so.
That clarification. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
You say that you are anticipating a high school to be built in 7 to 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, that depends all on growth. Could be sooner, could be later, but yeah.
So we would still be paying this bond out off
Right.
if it passes.
Mhm.
So the taxpayers, I don't think, are going to be very accepting to 120 something.
It'll be a lot more by then.
Yes.
Yeah,
So I just, what is the plan?
right,
How are we going to fund that?
right. Well, the only way to fund it, unless something changes in Idaho law, would be go back to taxpayers. Now, if that's the case, we would see more growth by then as well, so we'd have more people paying in. So there's a potential that we could still do that without raising what they're paying. Like with Cottonwood, we were able to do that without raising. In fact, since the Cottonwood bond was passed, the levy rate has, or what you're paying has dropped because it was at 427, it dropped to 424, which very insignificant, I understand that. But then when the board changed the way they tax it, then it went down to that 327 when we changed the philosophy there. And so as you have more people paying in, and if growth stops, well, it might be 20 years before we need a high school. But if growth continues, then we're going to have more people paying into that as well. So, but yeah, I mean, the only way to do it, unless something changes with Idaho code, would be go back to taxpayers.
So how do we get an impact tax that is taxing new buildings?
So as of right now, city entities can do that, county entities, school districts legally cannot do that. I don't know where that one's gone. There was a bill to add school districts to it, and I ran the math on that, and off the top of my head, let's say we had 500 new households come in, and you charged a $5,000 for every household, which is pretty big impact fee. What's the math on that, Bryce? It's 250,000, is that right, or 2.5 million?
500 homes.
Yeah, 500 times 5,000.
2.5 million.
So 2.5 million, which would be awesome, but it's a far cry from the 80 million or the 75 million or the 120 million. And so while I think that would be awesome and it would be a way to relieve some of that, I don't see that you could charge a big enough impact fee to negate the need to go to taxpayers. Does that make sense?
Well, it might fund it a little bit.
Yeah, it would offset some of that. Yeah, I totally agree. But to say that that would replace going out for bond, I don't see that happening.
I don't either.
Unless you put it high enough that nobody moved in, then you wouldn't need to go out for bond because you wouldn't have the growth.
Then the real estate would.
Yeah, there's a whole other group that'll be upset then, but yeah, so.
Yeah. Another question, if I can.
Yeah, of course.
This is before I moved in, it happened.
Mhm.
But when the new high school, this high school, was built, it's my understanding they didn't plan well enough for equipment, cabinetry, lockers, things like that, and they didn't have the money to pay for those things. And so they tried a $1 million bond.
I'll let, Mike was on the board at that point. That was before my time too, so I'll let him address that one.
Very quickly, everything that we requested in the bond for the high school, the request for the bond for the new high school, which is now our high school, was for $45 million. We built the high school for $41 million. That's what the cost was to build the high school. We actually came in under budget. And because of some things with some interest-free money that we got, we actually paid $37 million for the new high school. See me after, I'll explain how that happened. So we got a $45 million high school for $37 million. At that time, we paid for everything to go into the building as far as equipment, lockers. We were not short. We were under budget. I'm not sure where that's coming from. The only thing I can think of where it's coming from, the crunch we had when the high school was done, and remember we just finished a 275,000 square foot building. Our crunch came, remember that the funds that we received from the bond, the only place we can use those funds is for the construction, the equipment, and the things to finish high school. What we couldn't pay for out of the proceeds from the bond was janitorial maintenance and those type of things. At the time that happened, and if you kind of remember where we were at in the history of the world at that time after the Great Recession, we were tight, and we were very tight with everything from all the different things that go to maintain a building that size. And we scrambled for a couple of years, and we did look to see if we could get what's called a supplemental levy. So that's what you're probably referring to. But as far as the building itself, all the equipment, it was completed and done. On time, well under budget.
Was a supplemental levy,
Was not approved.
it was, so it went out for vote and was not.
Right.
Yes, that's correct. So it didn't happen.
Right.
And we just, kind of like we do, we got by
Yep.
without it. And so that's
And that might be a talking point too. Supplemental levy is, right behind you. Supplemental levy, we are the biggest school district in the state without a supplemental levy and one of very few. And a supplemental levy is more or less money you can do whatever you want with. So where a bond has to go to those projects and it can only be for capital expenditures, where supplemental levy can pay salaries, can really anything. It just goes to general fund. And so that's one thing our board has been very responsible with, is doing more with less. Again, we're one of the only districts that don't. I read on social media that we paid 3 times more than we had to for that high school, which is interesting because Madison built a smaller high school about the same time and spent way more than we did. And we built that for $37 million at a time when Madison built theirs just before or just after?
just after, and it cost them, their bond, finally, they had 2 bonds, their final bond took them to $60 million for a 225,000 square foot building. We built the high school that you see over there for $131 a square foot.
Yeah.
We had school districts calling us from across the nation. How did you do it?
Right.
We took advantage of a big recession.
Yeah.
So we built it the worst of times, the best of times.
Yeah. And so, and I know that people say, you know, we paid way too much for that. That's just simply not true. Looking at the environment at the time, it's not.
Yeah, I'd like to kind of go back to some earlier conversations,
yeah.
questions. Something that you said kind of piqued this question. It was, okay, if if we're approving a levy, and I'm not sure what the construct of the levy is and how much latitude is within your, what you can do, but if we were to approve the $75 million, okay, and we have good management, good efforts, and we end up paying or needing less than that $75 million.
Good question.
What happens with the difference between what we actually needed and what we approved to spend? Does that money just evaporate? Does
Right.
it go somewhere else?
Right. No, that's a good question. So that kind of goes back to the question here. So in the 75 million, let's say we come under at 68 million. So we have $7 million. So one of two things can happen. We can go back to the voters and say we have this $7 million. Can we reallocate that to another project? Let's say that we say, oh, now our elementaries, we need to add on to an elementary. I don't know. That's not happening. That's just an example.
So it would be go back to...
You'd have to go back to the voters, or you could, that's one option, or you could take that $7 million and pay it back into our debt fund, or what's that fund?
Into our debt fund.
Yeah, our debt fund. So more or less pay down the debt that we
Is
have.
the verbiage in that to go to any,
No.
because it's only the three specifically lined out legally, so if
Right.
this worked, we couldn't do that, could we?
Yeah. So yeah,
The
that you
verbiage
could,
In that bond?
because you're paying back that bond.
Oh, paying it back, but you can't move it to other structures.
Not without going to the
Unless other
voters.
structures legally.
Not without going to the
Only
voters.
Robert's one can be moved.
Right.
Because it's the only one that says any.
Right, yeah.
So why didn't we just put any on the other one too?
Because then we'd have the same concerns you have about the Robert one, the Roberts one.
I just want a clarification.
Right.
Because seriously, if the
Yeah.
AC's not going to get fixed, I'm going to be like,
Right.
knocking on the door, being like, I have a place for that money.
Right,
I know where I want it to go.
right.
So,
But yeah, so if we have that big amount of money left, it seems right we go back to the voters and say, can we do this with it? And actually with the Cottonwood, we have some money left there. Most of it's actually interest from what we have. And so that could be something we could go back and say, hey, we want to do the AC, we could do that. So, yes.
What measures do we have in place when it comes to taking bids on the architecture of the buildings? That we ensure that we build a nice building for our kids,
Right,
but we're not going above and beyond and just throwing money to things that are a waste of it.
Right.
Is there measures put in place? Are we doing things that we can eliminate some of the aspects that we build?
right, yeah, no, that's a good question. And so the process, it's building a public entity, a school is different than other processes. But you get you work with them on a design. So the last bond, we put out a design, and a lot of people said, we want to change this, 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 this. And we listened to that, and we tweak things, and some of the things are like, well, this corner's at an angle, it's going to cost a lot more. And you go back to the architect and the builders, they say, that's absolutely not going to cost more. But, okay, we'll listen. But if and when it passes, we'll get committees together and we'll sit down and go over those things. So the other question that comes up, and maybe related, is how do we select those? So we put out an RFQ, a request for qualifications, and they kind of more or less come and we interview them and we see what previous work they've done, what the cost was for that work compared to other projects, and then we select based on that. And then you work with your contractor and you will get a guaranteed maximum price once you get that. So the question comes up, well, it really never goes to bid, but that's absolutely not true because the contractor puts it out to bid to every subcontractor, and by law, we have to go with the lowest bid. So every amount of work there is put out to bid, and it's the lowest bid that we get.
Well, so when you do this, there will be a time when we put our opinions in.
Well, yes and no. Like, when you get 8,000 people putting their opinions in, it's probably, because that's what I had an email that asked, well, can we vote on the floor plan? Reality, no. I mean, that's not something you go to the ballot for. But we'll put committees, we'll put things together and really look at those. But yeah, I mean, our goal is to create a fiscally responsible building that meets the needs of our students. Now, do we want a barn? No. But do we need some glass pallets? No.
Okay, and that's what I just want to make sure.
Right.
We're doing our due diligence.
Yeah.
That we're being fiscally responsible here.
Right. Good.
And then a second question real quick while I've got the mic. You use Zillow for an average home value. What is the county using for an average taxable value at the moment? Is there much of a discrepancy?
Do you know that, Bryce? Because this Zillow, it came actually from our Zions Bank Public Finance. That's who does the bonding for a lot of different people.
You know, because if the county's only using 300,000 and, or, you know, whatever,
Right.
there'd be a huge discrepancy in that 327 number is wasting our time.
Well, not really. The 327 will be fixed no matter what. It's just what the county assessed. The Zillow was just taking the average house. But if your house is 600,000, then it's still going to be 327 based on that.
327 solid, okay.
It's per 100,000, yeah. Right, yeah.
I have a question on the general. So we go with the lowest bid, and then where you said, like, I know how the process works,
Right.
obviously, where I'm building, but where they verify that they actually put bids out to the subs?
Oh, yeah. We sit there when they open the
You do go
bids.
too deep on their subs.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So it's kind of a fun process.
General contractor.
It's kind of a fun process because, you know, they put it out to their subs, and then we have a meeting here, all the subs show up, and then we open them, read them, some leave happy, some leave not so happy.
Right.
Yeah, but yeah, we're very involved in that process.
Okay.
Yeah.
This might help. It's pretty interesting because I've been a part of that process, having built a few buildings. Two things. We've been in the process when those bids are open. We've actually had bids that have come in too low.
Right.
And if you're a homeowner or somebody building a building and you see that a bid that's too low, what's the first thing in your mind? Something's wrong here.
If it's half what everyone else is,
So
yeah.
we've even had that happen. And then we contacted back to that sub, and they're waiting by the phone. They answered about half a second. Oh, thank you. Can we get out of that?
Right.
They know, and we know, it couldn't have been done for that, and we're going to have a problem. So do we take low bids? Yes. But we're looking at high bids. We're looking at low bids, trying to give you the best value. I think one really important thing, so much we talk about what's happening in the future. We can actually show from the past something that we did. To your question, which was a great question. We built South Fork Elementary, and we had a need to build a second school. We basically built that same school again. Now, did we make some changes and a little bit of tweaking to it? But we saved all of us some money because we didn't have to completely redesign it. We used the same builder. There's benefits, there's efficiencies from doing the same thing again. And we did indeed do that. Now, did the second building cost more? Yeah, it was done years later. But in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars savings by doing the same thing over. And we're doing some similar things right now with things looking forward.
Yeah, so as far as the building, like, we're working with an architect that did a building for Bonneville, Black Canyon Middle School, and so we're going to pattern it. The plan is to pattern it after that because it's a lot cheaper to do that than start from scratch. We've toured the building several times, and we've looked at ways that, okay, this doesn't work for us. For instance, they needed to cut square footage, so they cut it in the classrooms. We said, no, we don't want to cut square footage in the classrooms. We would rather cut it other places, in some of the commons areas, some of the and so, or in some of the finishes to save money there rather than in classroom space.
Yeah, because one of the biggest complaints about this current high school is that there's a lot of people that think that it was over the top.
Right.
It was in excess. So, and it's a beautiful high school, but there's also things that we probably could have done that could have even saved more, even though you guys did a fantastic job coming in our bid. But we just want to
Right.
make sure that we do that again.
Right.
We're smart,
Yeah,
I guess.
no, I think that's, and I think that's a great thing, and that's one reason that we went. We actually went and visited that middle school. We went and visited some in Utah. We went, and some of the ones in Utah were like, no, that's more than what we need, no way. And so, yeah.
If the bond doesn't pass for the Roberts Gymnasium, is there a plan B? Or are they just out of luck?
Well, we don't have $5 million to build a gym, and so we've got to address some of those needs, but it probably wouldn't be a gym, to be honest. But as far as some of the maintenance things, we would have to find a way to address those things, yeah. Any other questions? Monica, do we have questions from? Oh, perfect. Okay, will this bond increase my taxes? Did we address that one well enough, do you think?
Oh, I came in late. Can
Okay.
you just tell me how, like, you've redone the debt structure
Right.
Somehow. So at 327 per 1,000. So
Right.
how much further out does that take? Sorry.
Okay, yeah, no, that's great. No.
How to convey.
Nope, you're good. So this, I think, will help explain it. Each one of these are an existing bond or series of bonds. 3 of them are for the high school, so it's really 1 bond, but 3 series. And this represents $7.5 million is what we need to pay that annually, which represents $327 per 100,000 of current market value. So how far that, it'll be a 20-year bond. And you can see when these fall off. So we have one falling off in 2025, 2027, 2029, but then this will extend it out to 2043. And so it is a 20-year bond. So, and that's how you can do it without raising taxes, because we're extending what we're currently paying out.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Once this bond is voted, can we change if we wanted to increase the amount that we're paying? If we want to increase taxes to pay this off sooner, is that even an option, or is that not?
Well, so there is a way to do, and actually the board has done that a couple of times. So you can only collect 21 months worth of debt obligation payments in that account. And so if you collect more than that, you've got to reduce what you're collecting, which is what we've done. But before that, a couple of times, the board decided to pay down some bonds, which actually saved millions of dollars, because we paid a lot of that interest early. We paid some of those off. So as far as going to the voters, I don't know that you could go to the voters and say, hey, can we raise taxes to pay this off sooner? Yeah. Defeasance, yeah, which is kind of a refinance.
Yeah, when there's a refunding, it's refinancing.
Yeah.
Easement, you put money into an escrow account to pay.
Okay, so there's 2 ways to do it, but both of them, the end result is paying it down sooner and saving money.
Okay, so somehow the board changed from the 424 to 327. So the board has the ability to fluctuate that number whenever and however they choose.
Yes and no.
I mean,
They have.
we vote for one way, but then
Right.
they have this.
Well, what they couldn't do is say, okay, we voted for the bond, now we're going to vote to raise that up to gain more money. But sometimes that goes up and down based on the market value. So for instance, since we're going to change the philosophy as well, is to collect an amount rather than a percentage, that percentage really doesn't matter anymore because it's that amount. But it could go down or it could go up without really the board saying we're going to change the percentage, because of the structure, the way that they're doing it now, which is more constant. Because now is that you get your county taxes and it went up $100,000 or whatever, it doesn't affect that because we're just collecting this amount. That number will change, but not the number you're paying, just that percentage of what you're paying. Does that make sense? I wish Bryce could talk.
There, too many percentages.
They're only collecting what the bond, the debt obligations each year. So if it gets spread out over more homes, your amount could go down.
Right.
And your values.
So-
A lot of people move down.
So it used to be that 427, that was the constant, right? And so what we collected was a variable, so we would collect when properties went way up, we collected more. But now that number we collect is the constant. So the variable will be that 427, 327, because the amount will stay the same, but if your home goes up, it's a smaller percentage of it you're paying to get the same dollar amount. Does that make sense?
Kind of like level pay. Is that kind of the easier way to kind
Yeah,
of
maybe,
look at it?
yeah.
Like your, because if you don't have that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want
Yeah,
to hurt level pay power.
So the 327 is this year. And it will change next year.
Yeah, it will, but the amount won't
Figure out
change.
that.
Right.
But your amount won't change.
Right.
I get it.
Yeah.
I totally get it. I really think that, anyway.
So most likely, if trends continue, that 327 will go down because more people will be paying in and values will go up.
Because you're trying to collect $7.5 million a year?
Yeah.
Yeah, $7.5 million.
That's
Right.
our house payment.
Yeah. Yeah, more or less, yeah.
Yeah, so the idea then is, as more neighbors move in,
That 327 can go down, and then we're still going to be obligated for
To
that
$7.5 million. Yeah.
$7.5 million annual payment. Okay? But now there's more of us
Right.
to pay that. And so the amount that each of us now have to pay becomes less.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Good. So I thought of an analogy for this the other day. I'm collecting money from my son's basketball team to go play in a tournament. One tournament, we got 6 players, so they're paying $45. The other one, we have 9, and they're paying $28. So it's the same thing. Like, we got more people paying in, and so probably a bad analogy, but it came through my head.
You have to split it into 2.
Right.
To build another school.
Yeah.
So there we are.
Yes.
If the bond does not pass, what's Plan B?
Yeah. Well, that will. So if the bond doesn't pass, what's Plan B? That's a great question. And so that will be some hard conversations as a community, as a board, to look at. At this point, we have at least 2 years before we'd be in a building anyway. And so we have some time to figure that out. We feel like we can make do until that point. But if growth continues at that point, we're going to have to really look at that and say, what are those answers? You know, other districts have looked at split sessions, have looked at things like that. So I don't know. And really, we haven't had that discussion because this is the plan that we're going with. If the community says this plan doesn't work, then we'll start having those with the community. But it's a good question.
Just one thing to what we've already said, but I want to make sure that we're all clear on this and that the public is really clear on this, because this is just fundamental to this issue. Everything hinges on growth. If we talk about problems in our district, problems in our community, and this happening, it's all tied to that word. We need to understand what that looks like. My favorite thing is to understand that growth, to me as a school board member, I have 200 kids show up next year, extra. And I have an obligation from the oath that I took to provide how many desks? 200 desks. As soon as I have 200 desks, how many classrooms do I need? And that's how I see it, and that's the only way that I really can see it, under that obligation I have to support the Constitution. So make sure, and then the superintendent's done a great job of, we give you some numbers, and you need to understand when we give these numbers, my job as a board member is to look how far out. Am I looking out next week or 3 weeks? You know the answer, Debbie. How far out am I supposed to be looking? 10 years. We should have a vision of 10 years, as best we can, but we don't have a crystal ball. So the number the superintendent gave out of a high school, 7 to 10 years. Only one thing would cause that to be a need in 7 to 10 years. What is it? Growth. Now, that doesn't happen alone. In other words, we're not saying we're going to build a high school in 6 to 7 years. And when you see that number, you look at that chart or graph, and well, I'm concerned because you're going to build a new high school in 7 years. How are you going to fit it in? Well, two things are going to change on that graph. And the first thing, of course, is that same word, growth. Now we have 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 more homes. Now that requires me to have new desks. Why? Growth. And if they do come in, then there's the old saying, a rising tide floats all the ships. So everything, did we predict what would happen this last 4 or 5 years, that our homes would, average value in our community last year, 44%. Mine went up 62%. And so you take all these numbers, and that's just what's causing all of us, and I have the same concerns you have because I'm a taxpayer as well, but it's all hinged around growth. I wish I could make Rigby this quiet little town that we knew when I first moved here, but those days are gone. And so now we look out as best we can and say, if it continues on this path, and I promise you, this good man and the board members will look at those charts and those graphs going out 3%, and now 6%, and now a flatline growth. If we don't grow, this plan lasts us for a good many years. And we don't have to talk to you about any change. And we'd like to talk to you about those changes where these bonds start to drop off. But the reality is, it's all driven by growth. And the decisions we make will be based solely upon how many kids are showing up in our district. Thank you for your time.
Thanks,
I
man.
just have one more
Yeah, no, you're good.
About finances.
Uh-huh.
Regardless, if
If the bond passes, it's 327 per 100,000. If it doesn't pass, it's 327.
Not necessarily. It would be for the next 2 to 3 years, but after that it would drop. As those fall off, that would drop. So yeah. Next question on here, and if you have more, please. Is there a way to vote early? Yes, you can vote today or tomorrow at the courthouse. You can walk in and do that. Monday is not, because then they're getting ready for the election on Tuesday. Will the Rigby Middle School campus only house CTE courses? That's a great question. No, and here's the reason why. If I have someone taking a let's say a nursing course, and they go over there, it would make sense to be able to stay there for half the day and take an English course and a math course or whatever that is. The vision for that would be, if I know that I want to go into the medical field, then I'm going to be taking, you know, my courses in the medical field. But wouldn't it be great if I could take my English courses that also are slanted towards the medical field, meeting those same standards, but rather than reading some other novel, I'm reading a medical journal. And so we would have some of those traditional classes there that parallel with that. We already do that with automotive. We have an automotive math class that students that are in that automotive program, they take this math class. And so they're learning the same concepts as if they're in algebra, geometry, or whatever, but they're learning it in context of automotive. And so, yeah, that's a good question. But yes, there will be traditional classes there as well. What is the capacity of the Rigby Middle School Rigby Middle School for high school students? So once we're done, right now we could put 1,000 students in there. We've had more with the trailers, but we could put 1,000 in there. However, some of those rooms will be knocking out walls to create bigger spaces for some of those programs. And so probably around 700 is what we're thinking, is that capacity would be around 700 there. Walking to and from the high school to the old middle school. I know that's a concern. It's a concern now because we're walking to actually 17 different locations now. I actually think it would be easier because there's going to be one walking path to one location rather than to all those other trailers. But it is a concern. It is something that my daughter slipped and fell on the ice yesterday, or a couple days ago. So I get that. It is a concern. But I think it's easier to say, okay, here's the path, and we can maintain that. And without all the middle school traffic there, that won't be a bus lane anymore, and so it'll actually eliminate some of those traffic between there.
I think you mentioned earlier, we're going to try to put some of the core classes over there as well, to keep them there as much as we can.
Yeah, and so I think it'll eliminate some of that, and the fact that we can schedule in a way that if you're there, in most cases you could be there half the day. So my daughter, she's not happy right now because her first hour is in the trailer, second hour's in the building, third hour's in the trailer, fourth hour's in seminary, so she's all over the place. But we could eliminate a lot of that by blocking those together.
And we eliminate the trailers, the modulars.
Yes.
They're gone.
Well, they'll probably move somewhere else at some point, but yeah, that's one of the biggest reasons to do that, yeah.
I know that there's some kids that are having to pay or do makeup for classes because they were that clear on the one side of campus and they've had to come this way and they were late every single time in class. Is that something that will be addressed in the sense of allowing longer breaks between classes to get where they need to go? Or will teachers be a little more accommodating?
So yes, right now we accommodate that. Those classes out there, they'll let out a little earlier, start. And truthfully, like if kids are habitually tardy, I've went and walked that. You can do it. There's some other social activities that take place. But yeah, I mean, but again, I think by being able to eliminate the number of trips, that will help with that as well. Yeah. Okay, I think that's all the ones from here. Did we have any online?
So one of the questions is, will the new middle school have a band and or orchestra classrooms?
Right. Yes, it will. Is that it? Oh, that was an easy one. Well, truly appreciate your questions and your willingness to come and get answers. And please, anytime, whether it's a bond or anything else going on in the district, we are always open to sit down and answer questions. Yes?
Yeah. Have you talked to the state about, because they control the taxes.
Mm-hmm.
Have you talked to them about if they expect the taxes to go up? Because they control how much we pay.
So they can, as far as, I mean, they don't necessarily control the bond taxes.
Well, that's on the
Right.
value.
Right.
How much they charge comes out of Boise.
Well, it actually comes out of the county and it's assessed, but there's other taxes that they...
The county sets the value.
Right.
They set the amount.
Well, not for this, not for the bond. That would be based on what we set, yeah.
I think we're maybe asking two different questions.
Potentially so.
Does the state legislature and our leadership over there determine some of our... Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
They determine all the taxes.
Well, they set the rate, and then your house determines the tax, the value.
Not necessarily the rate for this, though, like
Right, but I think he's asking.
the property value.
Your property value,
Yeah.
and then what your, so what your property value is.
Yeah, yeah,
Taxes they control.
Goes into
Yeah.
the levy.
Because you go over to the courthouse and they blame it on Boise.
yeah.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, no, I get that. And, I mean, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of control over that, other than just talking to our legislators and,
State gonna raise.
yeah. So this, if the state raised, it wouldn't affect this, because this is set at, we're paying back $80 million over 20 years at 4% interest, so that wouldn't change. Now, and because of the way that the board is collecting this now, even if they change the way your property's assessed, it's not going to change that, because we're getting that specific amount, not a percentage of your property.
Yeah, the value goes up and we pay more.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was the case, but now that's not the case with bonds, at least with the school district. Yeah. No, it's complex, believe me, it's complex, yeah. Okay, any other questions? All right, well, if you enjoyed this so much, we have another one Monday night. You're welcome to come back.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.